Yay. Welcome to another episode of the Archetypos podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to Lena McCain, who we met at a resource fair, and I was just very intrigued by how you run your business. Um, and one of the things that really was interesting, I remember you saying two things where I was like, huh, I've never thought about it that way. And the first thing is you said that like when people had spending habits that ended up resulting in like a lot of debt or a lot of shame, you actually considered that self-harm behavior. And then the
Mhm.
second thing you said is that when you work with your clients, and I'll let you introduce yourself and the type of clients you work with in a little bit. When you work with your clients, you like automatically include a financial education piece. And that just blew my mind. And that is why I'm having you on today, so we can hear more about that. So would you please introduce yourself and then we can start talking about that?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Lena McCain, and I'm the founder and clinical director at Interfaith Bridge Counseling. And we're a dynamic mental health organization that's dedicated to serving the diverse needs of young people, tweens, teens, and 20-somethings, so that 10 to 35 age range. The young people and their systems of support throughout Colorado. And I would say our overarching mission is to provide affordable, quality mental health services rooted in person-centered liberation-based principles. And we do that through individual counseling, group therapy, and digital mental health resources.
Okay. Say just a wee bit more about person-centered liberation-based principles.
Yeah, there's so much we can dive into around that. But I think, at the end of the day, the reality is that I believe that the client in front of us knows more about their life than I do because they live it. And when we are creating and talking about mental health communities, I really believe that we should come from the approach that the person in front of us who's coming is the expert. And I'm there as the facilitator to help highlight things, to bring things forth, to really be able to help us develop recognition, self exploration, skill building, and communal support. And so, when I say person centered, liberation based principles, what I'm talking about is uplifting the person in front of me and helping them gain the confidence and those skills for that purpose, success, and autonomy, and really the freedom that all of that can come when you have a community that supports you in that. And I think that that's kind of the vital role of mental health therapists.
Yay. Yeah, I also want to talk maybe a little bit later about the way that you do create community because you also run groups as well. But
Mhm.
let's before we get too into the weeds already here at the beginning, let's do this piece around money because we live in late stage capitalism. I feel like money is sticky for everyone, even people who have it. And so I really love that it to me it just kind of it's this energy of just like taking the bull by the horns. But I'm curious about like when you realized you needed to do that, and I realize I'm going to ask you like three questions in a row, like when you realized that you needed to do that, that needed to be a piece of your work, kind of how you introduce it to your clients, and then, just very generally kind of what it looks like, how you tailor it to people. Yeah, just tell me everything.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. Like it actually starts way back before I even started Interfaith Bridge Counseling. It started when I was in my internship. And in my internship, the clients that I had the privilege and honor of working with were dreamers and first gen. So a lot of immigrant status teens. And when we would talk, the thing that I was educated on really early by them is that a lot of them were the primary financial source in their household, right? So think about a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, maybe a 17-year-old coming in and being the financial like breadwinner and authority in their household because they have a couple of skills that people in their family might not have. They have protection over their status, especially if they're a dreamer. They can usually speak more than one language, so they're fluent in maybe Spanish or Arabic and English. They are already in school, and so they're navigating systems and learning how to be in American culture, right? So they have all some of these privileges that some members in their family don't have. And so they're able to make some of these executive decisions, and they're able to get jobs pretty easily that are not as low paying as someone who may not have status in the US and so or protections in the US. And so in talking to them, I was like, if these are the people I like to work with, and I love them. I do. If I really like working with them, there is some intentionality that has to come around this idea that one, they know a lot more about finances than I do, especially as like at that time, like my mid 20s, they knew a lot more about making financial decisions than I did and like how to prioritize it. But two, like that is often what fueled their motivation to move through school. So it wasn't so much like games and you know you can be whatever you want. It was how do we get our family to this next elevated level of like stability within finances. So that was like kind of the starting point of what made me start to think about it. When I graduated, I wasn't going to go work for another community agency or a nonprofit. I knew I was opening my own private practice, my own mental health organization. And so half of those clients followed me. So one, I needed to create a payment scale that they could afford. And you know they don't qualify for Medicaid either, so and I couldn't take Medicaid as pre-licensed, so it was like figuring out a scale there, but then also really recognizing that the Colorado's in a really privileged place in that young people can access mental health without their legal guardian's consent. um, and the trick of that is they have to be able to pay for their services usually if they're not going to go through a community health agency. And so that made it really clear to me that like the way we set up Interfaith Bridge on a payment level had to be accessible for them. And then if I wanted to get my needs met, because I have, as a clinician who went to grad school, a lot of student loan debt, the first in my family to go to, you know, a 4-year college, let alone get a master's degree, right? I have my own values and things about money that I want to have stability in. It was like, we have to start talking about it. They have to know the importance of like wow, how I'm making it accessible, how it impacts me, how it impacts them, and like together we should be moving up those ranks. It shouldn't just be me capitalizing on them, and it shouldn't be them just like making this, you know, getting more money and then never seeing that in return, right? Like it's all about that communal give and take and talking about that. Um, I'll stop there because I just like word vomited at you.
Nope, you actually really stayed inside the bumpers. I'm impressed. But that was all very relevant to I asked. It was a beautiful origin story. And yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to call out. Is this piece of just like really letting your clients educate you. I thought that was really beautiful and humble and like, um, yeah, just for all like my practitioners listening, just a question to reflect on. Like, do you let your clients educate you? And if so, what are they teaching you? And then this second piece of like kind of needing to like ladder up together, right? Like where like you want your services to be affordable, especially to people who are like don't have a huge amount of wealth built up or like credit built up. And also like it serves both of you to like teach them how to get to a more financially stable place so that they can compensate you better. And just, have that for themselves in their life. So that was like very clever. I'm very impressed. And and I also love that it has its roots in like something that's actually very anti-capitalist, which is just like mutual support and mutual aid. Um,
Yeah, that's a huge part of it because like one of our values is community at Interfaith Bridge. And like not only is it a value, oh wait, I want to check because we both froze. Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. I see myself frozen. I don't see you frozen. Can you still
Okay.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Cool. I'll keep going. Our value is one of our values is community, and not only is it one of our values, but it's also one communal support is one of our four approaches of our way of supporting people in our mental health program. Like that's how we work with them, and it's like if we can't even figure it out, clinician and client, how can they even trust me really to help them with that or to follow through on that value? And like the other reality is like this is my job. I didn't just start working somewhere. Like this is my community. I created Interfaith Bridge, and I want people to feel that community, and I want to feel it too. And I think that that can be like really tricky for people to talk about in the clinician setting, like in the mental health field. But like it's true, I want the community, and I want to feel good and restorative in that community, and I want them to feel that way too. So it has to be mutual.
Um, I'm gonna turn off my camera just for a second and turn it back on and see if that gets me out of freeze mode.
Okay.
But I want to, while I'm doing that, hear a little bit more about just like maybe more granular stuff that you and your clients kind of work through or work on when it comes to like money and finances. Like, do you have kind of a basic curriculum or basic principles or like a basic starting point? Or like, if you don't mind sharing about that, that would be really interesting.
Yeah. Let me take a moment and think about my answer to that question. Mm.
Okay,
So
I'm
I
frozen.
think, yeah, you're unfrozen. Um, You know, I won't say it's like a specific curriculum because one, I'm really bad at following curriculums. I just like get really defensive about them and like I can come up with something better, which may not be true, but what I've learned is like just don't even try with the curriculum and you'll be fine. Um, but I will say that like I think it is inherently built into everything that we do. So from the moment that you land on our website, like our pricing is transparent, it's everywhere, it's almost on every single page. To when you do a consult call with me or any of the other clinicians, we talk about it. It is a point that all of everyone on our team is trained on, but came from me being like, we need to talk about it. Like, I'm going to lead by example and say, you know, let's talk about financials. And we specifically don't use language like a sliding scale because we're not sliding down. This is our payment scale. We're not going to make you prove your income to, I'm not interested in any of that. I don't care where you get your money to pay like I'm going to trust you. And so we talk about it in this very like casual but honoring way. And one of the things that I always say is, you know, we operate on a pay what you can scale between $60 and $125 or $140 per session. If you're coming in without familial support, we will drop that scale to $25 to $140 per session if you're paying private pay. What I want to ask you is, in order for you to attend every week and be committed to this while honoring that this is my livelihood, what are you able to afford? And I think that sets the bar for how we're going to talk about finances because it also tells me a lot about them too. If they rush through it and they're like, yeah, I'll pay the full fee, da, 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 I'm like, oh, we have a lot of anxiety about finances. If they pause and they go, I've never heard of that before. Let me think about that. That lets me know that like we may not have so much anxiety or maybe trauma around it, but that they maybe haven't considered the type of control that they have, right? If they're very clear of what they can, it's like, oh, they already know their budget most likely for what they can afford, right? So that gives us kind of the working piece. And then when we get into session, we do a couple things within the first 8 weeks that we work with someone. And one of those is going to be what I call identity mapping, where we pull up a whiteboard and we put their identities out on this whiteboard in a really interactive way. So if I'm the client, like in the center is Lena, and then all my identities start to come around it. So like there might be therapist Lena, and I'm going to put that somewhere on the whiteboard in relation to myself, my center self. And then sister Lena and partner Lena and extroverted Lena. And then me as the clinician, I'm always going to go, great. So where's financial Lena? Where is she on this board? Ooh, cool. And then we put her on and we do some parts work with that. With all those identities, but also that financial piece, because I do want to get more context of it. And then somewhere after that, we will also do what I call our values activity. And that the first time we do it, it's about their general values, but I do that because I want them to get comfortable with this values activity, because in about 15 to 20 weeks, if not sooner, I'm going to do it again about their finances, and we're going to make their value system around their finances. And that gets brought in because whether we like it or not, at least in America, your livelihood, your happiness, your well-being is attached to your financial stability. It just is. And that's a really hard pill to swallow when we're like, but I don't even care about money. Maybe I'm even against this system. And it's like, well, but if something goes wrong or you want to eat or you want to live, you have to have money. And so we can't be scared to talk about it. We really need to have values around it. I wish we lived in a world that we didn't, but we do. So it can't be taken away from the conversation. So those are just some of the things that I think like it's built in inherently, but like there also are some key activities that I'm always holding and that I'm training our team to always hold around finances.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let me think of where I want to go from here. So I mean, this might get us off into the weeds a little bit, but I'm actually really curious if you are open to kind of using yourself as an example and like talking about financial Lena and talking about Lena's values around finances.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
cool. I want to like get just a little bit more granular and see what that might look like when someone's done that activity and kind of played with those pieces.
Yeah. So I think if I like, we'll call me like young Lena. I don't want to call me baby Lena because that's not people, but I'm not necessarily as young as I once was. If I were the age that a lot of our clients come through our doors as, so let's say like, I don't know, 17, 18. I think my values around finances were at that time, don't talk about it. Things will work out. You might have to work extra hard, but it'll work out. We don't spend on lavish things or frivolous things. We're always keep a restaurant job because you always have a meal covered then.
Mm,
Don't ask for help and don't tell people. Don't talk about it.
mhm.
And if I were to do that activity, those were some of the statements that financial Lena would say. Don't talk about it. We don't talk about money. Our family doesn't. It's considered rude, right? Be grandiose about it. Be perfect about it. That's why you're going to school. Take out whatever debt you have to be able to get through school.
Yeah.
But if we rework those values of like, okay, so that's the values that I had. What did I want them to be? If we get vulnerable about that, a lot of people want to feel proud of the way that they handle their money, how they make their money. They want to feel empowered to make decisions about their money. They want to feel empowered to be able to say yes and no to fun things and not so fun things. I know I wanted to not have to worry about it all the time. And I really wanted to be able to be creative about it because for me, like by the time I was 21, 22, I was holding down 5 jobs and going to school full time.
That
And
is,
that was so stressful.
yeah.
Was so stressful. And I lived on my own because I couldn't really trust to live with somebody and have my needs met and like be able to just come in and out as needed. And it was so stressful. And I'm neurospicy, like my depression goes real tall. I'm now a passively suicidal person all the time, like I'm a gray person. But then it was heightened because I was trying to survive. And because I was trying to survive, I also didn't have the time to slow down and really think about like, where did my money go, or what did I want to spend it on, or how was I making it, and did that feel good? Um, I couldn't just be like, wow, my political beliefs don't agree with this, so I'm not going to shop at this store. I just needed to get food that day and be able to go on my merry way because I had things to do and I wasn't sleeping well. And money is tied to everything, literally everything. Our like confidence is tied to money. And so when I think about like me doing that activity or that understanding, it's like my values, I would literally have to sit there and be like, I want to feel empowered. I want to feel proud. I want to be able to be creative. I just want to be educated and wise about money. I want that. Wanting it, and you have to actually identify it to be able to know that you want it, and then say it to someone so they can not necessarily, like, yes, hold you accountable, but also be able to be in that with you, right? Like, then as a clinician, what I would want is someone to be like, okay, I'm holding this for you. These are some of your values around money. Here are some of your goals. Where do they and don't they interact? And how can we start to have corrective experiences around money so that those wanted values become the main ones?
Oh my gosh, this is so good. So I'm just like writing some notes here because speaking of being neurospicy, my brain is like, I'll hear something and forget it like a nanosecond later. Um, but one thing that came up for me as you were talking is this idea that like it's interesting because I think people think about values more generally than they think about like financial values. So I love
Mhm.
that you get very specific about that. But there's also this piece around how like a lot of us, when we do consider our general values and we want to live in an aligned way with them, it turns out that it actually takes like a lot of money, right? Like if we do want to choose the stores that we shop at, or like shop more local, or like shop more like handmade, like that is actually going to take more money than just like going to Walmart to get your groceries. So I think that's an interesting, that's what you talking made me think of. The second thing that I want to I mean there's a lot of things that I want to talk about, but before we kind of move too far forward, I want to talk about like the community piece and the money piece and kind of how you see being in community or community experiences or like just how you work with community influencing how people feel around money or work with money, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
just kind of want to see that Venn diagram, how it looks in your practice and in your brain. Um,
Yeah.
okay, let me just, hopefully I'll remember my other questions. Let's start there.
Okay. Okay. Write them down.
No, I'm like,
Yeah. Well, and before I dive into like kind of that piece, I do want to name like, yeah, that privilege of like, yeah, you have to have money, even down to therapy. If you don't want to use your insurance,
yeah.
you have to have money. If you want to see it, at least in the state of Colorado, if you are on Medicaid and you want to see a provider that doesn't have Medicaid, you have to be off of Medicaid.
Hmm.
They can't see you, right? That means you have to have money to have freedom of choice. And
Yeah.
that's really difficult, especially for young people, because chances are, if they decide to get off their parents' insurance, if they move out, now they're going to go on Medicaid. So many freedoms just got taken away. And we don't really think about that. At least my opinion is we don't think about that in the mental health field or as practitioners that support families and individuals and young people about how integrated that is when we're talking about making money for ourselves and being stable, which I think ties into the community aspect. When I think about community, well, when I think about therapy and community in general, I think of an infinity symbol. One loop is individual and one loop is community. People come to work with me and we start going through that loop of individual, right? They're working hard, they're doing all this personal growth, we're doing all the narrative, deep dive stuff, healing. But eventually they're going to hit that crossroad in that infinity loop. And they could loop again, they're going to hit the cross again. What we really want is for them to move into the community loop, right? Take what we're talking about and what we're processing and start to practice that in other brave spaces, not safe spaces, brave spaces. We need community to have brave spaces. So we want them to go out into the community, start practicing some of those things, talking about their values, getting comfortable with it, making choices, watching themselves make mistakes, etc., and have community give them feedback in a restorative way, so then they can hit that cross point again and keep coming in and working on the individual. And the goal is that they'll start smoothly looping each other. One of the ways that we really do that is, one, I like to use myself, right? Like if I'm part of your community now, and I use that wording a lot. So is there anyone that needs to know about me? You know, we get a lot of teens in Colorado who come to see us without parental or legal guardian consent. There might be a point into our work where, yeah, they're ready to tell their guardians, like, yeah, I want them to know about you, and maybe bring them in. Maybe we need to start talking at school because they need accommodations or they need a schedule that they're actually going to get credit for working. Or maybe they actually need to stop going to school and they need support to get their GED because they have a really great idea for a business and they need the time to start putting and investing in that business that could make them more money. Or maybe they landed a job and they have a full-time schedule, right? Like there's so many pieces in that way of like bringing us into community. But then also, like, honestly, I'm a big believer that everyone should be in group therapy if they're an individual. That's just a bit, if the group's good. And that's because, like, I just see it be such a big deal, which can be a step to having a brave space if you're like everyday systems of support aren't the community you're looking for, that can help you start practicing and talking about these things and holding you accountable, because like we can hold ourselves accountable, but usually we do that by shaming ourselves.
Oh, snap. Did you
Yeah.
just say that? That was so good. Just say that one more time.
Yeah. We can hold ourselves accountable individually, but we usually can't do that without shaming ourselves.
Oh my goodness.
Community, a brave community, a community that's actually meant for you, is going to be more intentional about not shaming you, or at least apologize if they do.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah, I don't know many individuals who like apologize to themselves, like if they have like an inner critic.
No, they really don't, do they? I don't. I definitely don't. My OCD comes in quick.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Oh
mhm.
my gosh, there's so much goodness there. I I want to hear more about brave spaces. That's the first time I'm hearing that phrase. And I want to know exactly what it means. I want to know how someone can identify a brave space and kind of what the benefit or like what the work is to do in brave spaces, like how you use brave spaces. Um, and then I also want to just hear a little bit more about what the different benefits or the different feels are between group therapy and individual therapy. Because what I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like like individual therapy is good, but like add group therapy onto that, or like group therapy does something that individual therapy can't accomplish. So I want to hear more about that. So two questions.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm a big believer. I don't believe in safe spaces. In my own decolonizing work, decolonization work is, yeah, safe spaces are bullshit. They don't exist. Um, Typically people define a safe space as a space where a person or group of people will not face discrimination, criticism, harassment, physical or emotional harm. Um, but I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's possible. And I say that from works read from Maren Burton. And to paraphrase Burton, safe spaces can become unsafe in a matter of moments. When you are a marginalized person or an oppressed person, we are not monolithic. We're not uniform in how we express or interpret or connect in our experiences. And we cannot assume equality in spaces because intersectionality exists. And when intersectionality exists, it exists with risk. So the way that I've learned through works like Burton and Tima Kuhn and so many amazing individuals is that we can't guarantee a safe space, but we can work to offer a brave space. Brave spaces are where, and brave spaces aren't perfect. I do want to name that. There's risk of harm in brave spaces too, but to have a brave but safer space, like that's what I'm always trying to cultivate or try to bring forward, is like we want a space where people are actively participating in the norms and the parameters of where they exist. And that can be a space like a group of people or one-on-one or with yourself. But we want to have this bravery of like, I'm actively participating in the group norms, the relationship agreements, so that I'm giving informed consent for how I'm going to be showing up, how others are going to be showing up, and how I can expect them to show up for me. And if we can get to that point, we can create a brave space where we can start to push our edges in our healing and in the type of life we want to live, and to make sure our values are being met, and learn how to practice making mistakes and getting forgiveness. And you
So
just
it
can't.
sounds like some of the, maybe not all, but some of the foundational components of a brave space are like an experience of your own agency or autonomy, and then like self knowledge, like you've kind of gotten clear, around what your needs and desires and expectations are for yourself and the group. And then also this like compassion piece where like the group isn't going to tear you to pieces. Like there's just like there is some like trust of the group. I don't know if I'm using the right words, but those feel like foundational components. Does that sound right, or do you want to add anything or correct anything?
I think that's like the ultimate goal. Like that's the ultimate goal of where we get to. Like if everything is working, and like once again, that doesn't mean harm doesn't happen. Like, I've run plenty of groups where like they've been friends and participating in this group for a couple of years now, and someone did something to rupture the relationship in the group context, and a group member is really hurt, and they come to me individually so that then I can bring it to the group, and then the group is held accountable and has to practice what I'm preaching more or less for the last couple of years. And like, we made a mistake. I'm not going to shame myself for making a mistake. I can show accountability and remorse, and then I'm going to actively participate to change that behavior. Like that's the ideal of where we want to be. But I think when we're at the beginning stages, a brave and safer space looks like I'm going to hold myself accountable to trying some new things and learning how to be okay with making a mistake. I'm going to practice it and know that like it's scary, but I'm here because someone asked me to be here and they've got my back enough to let me try. Like that's kind of like like the agreement of showing up is the first step. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. Well, okay, and you might have kind of partially answered this, but um this idea of how like being in a group or like group therapy is actually a little bit different and has a little bit different benefits than just being in individual therapy. Um,
Mhm.
will you just kind of bring that in?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
totally. I'm a nerd for group therapy. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so individual therapy is significantly important. And the thing about individual therapy is like you're not in there alone, right? You actually have another person in there with you. It's the clinician. Like, so you're in a pair, and that can be exceptionally vulnerable and really good. And there is so much work to be done in that. But the reason why I think group therapy is important and how it differs is what you're practicing there. Like ultimately, what your therapist is holding is that when in this hour session, this 50-minute session, you're practicing things. And eventually, the hope is you will go out into your life and you will start practicing some of those things that you did in that session with the therapist in your everyday life. So it might look like practicing being empathetic or advocating for yourself, putting boundaries in place, regulating, right? And there are small spaces in which we can do that all the time. However, sometimes we don't have the systems of support or environments that are safe enough for us to act with that type of bravery. So if you're trying to advocate for yourself, I'll use myself as an example. I have an invisible disability. There were times when I would try to advocate for myself when I was younger, where I would be met with such defensiveness and exuberant harm that like I never wanted to try it again because that was the only space I had it. Nowhere else I felt like I needed to practice that. What a beautiful place to practice is like a group therapy situation where I could go into maybe not a disability specific group, but maybe a able-bodied group and practice with people who are intentionally there to build and foster relationship and work on their own ish so that when my needs came up as a disabled person, I would feel safer being like, hey, you know, I'm having a really hard time understanding you because both your camera is off and it's kind of mumbling. Could you maybe try speaking a little bit more clearly or turning your camera on so I can see your lips? And that group member is more likely to go, yeah, of course, absolutely. Or can I type it in the chat since I'm not comfortable being on screen right now? Can I type it on the chat after I'm done talking? That group member is already participating in the group and has expectations of how they're supposed to behave and interact with me. I now have a person that I can have that corrective experience with. And that can be for all sorts of things. And you can do some of that in individual, but at a certain point, if your therapist is good, you have a really great relationship with them. And like, it's not so scary. It's really not to start asking for your needs from them and then because you are confident they'll meet them. But to go into a group of 3 to 6 to 10 people and be like, hey, hi, I see you once a week or once every other week. And we don't just talk about me, we talk about everybody. And I still need to ask and participate and practice. That's another level of vulnerability. And the other piece of this all too is like we are rarely in pairs or by ourselves in our lives. We are often in groups. We may not like that, but we are. Work, school, gaming, playing, activities out in the world, dinner, we are rarely by ourselves. We have to be able to function in groups and not feel terrible.
Mm.
The other important piece about groups is like, we don't really know how to make friends in the world. We're not taught. So if you are not a person who goes to traditional schooling or in-person work, and you are not an extrovert who has more of that natural skill, and maybe you're not close to your family, it can be really hard to make friends. There's no environment that teaches you how to make friends. In fact, I had a client say something really profound once upon a time, that just like threw off fireworks around this piece of, we're only taught how to build relationships out of circumstance or convenience.
Mm.
And so unless we purposely put ourselves in something that wasn't out of circumstance or convenience, we don't know how to build a relationship. And I think group therapy is a really great way, because the only thing you have in common is either the subject of that group or because some professional told you you needed to be in group. That's not a lot as far as circumstance and convenience goes for learning how to build an intimate, in-depth relationship with somebody.
That's really, yeah. So it sounds like in some ways group therapy can really function as like a bridge brave space where like you really get to like play with the stuff that you are learning in individual therapy. Um, I love that. Yeah, and this relational piece as well. Like you're so right. As you were talking, I was like, huh, how did I learn to make friends? And the thought that came to mind was like, identify the popular kids and do whatever you need to do to like suck up to them. Like that was my template for like making friends.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, think about it, right? Like your first introduction to relationships is your family, and they usually are a little biased towards you. So, okay, you can build a relationship with them. And then the next time you make relationships is when you go to school.
yeah,
And then you're there for what, 18 years? Like you're there. And if you go on to college, even longer.
yeah.
It's a long
Um,
time to have an environment to make relationships. And then it just gets taken away.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it can be the Wild West too. I mean, I think there's, like you said, such different quality to like familial relationships versus like peer relationships. Okay, that's interesting to think about, but I want to get,
Yeah,
I want
we got to go
back to this, I want to hear a little bit more, like if you're comfortable giving examples or just kind of grounding it down into something. I want to hear more about how people might work with their money stuff in brave spaces, like some examples of like money stuff that your clients had or were like bringing into brave spaces. And then I also want to hear about corrective experiences and like, again, just kind of defining that, like, what does that mean? What does that do? How do you know when you've had one? And if there is an example that comes to mind around like a corrective experience that you or a client had with money, just to kind of ground us into what that might look like.
Yeah. I think it's important to name, you know this, but I don't think people listening know this as in depth, is like, I view my perspective on self-harm is that it can be appropriate or inappropriate. It's not good or bad. Everybody self-harms. It's just whether it's inappropriate or more appropriate, and it's synonymous with survival behavior. Self-harm is synonymous with the phrase survival behavior. Finances can become a form of self-harm in an inappropriate or appropriate way because we're trying to survive. It is one of our biggest ways of surviving. When I think about how the different ways in a brave space that money can come up, I think particularly with young people, we start talking about finances and people think that like young people really aren't aware of it. If we're just talking about like the way we typically think of, like, let's say like a 13-year-old who isn't the main provider of their family, which is like I think what most people like to think of American teens is like, they are aware of the financial situation of their family or their household. They are aware if they impact it or not. Most teens are. Um, and there can be a lot of shame around this, like, am I a burden? Me existing is a burden. It is expensive for a child to exist. And then we start hearing phrases like, well, if I just didn't exist, my family would be better off.
Hmm.
And that can also be tied to finances because they see themselves as a burden, especially if they're in therapy, right? I just went to inpatient and I'm suicidal, and now I have to go to individual therapy. Man, I cost my family a lot of money compared to my other siblings. If I just didn't exist. When we talk in brave spaces, if we can get a point where we're willing to say those things out loud, the other people in that brave space have a greater chance of being able to hold the two truths. Yes, you probably do cost your family more money. That's true. These are expensive things. And you deserve to cost that much money because you are important. You are perfect just the way you are. And because you exist, you deserve it, no matter what it is. Our inner critic doesn't allow that to happen. Our inner critic is really loud and really quick to snuff all that out and put us in a shame spiral. And so I think community and in group therapy or whatever ways it is, when we get to have brave spaces, we can start having someone hold the different truths and also be firm about it with us and not let ourselves harm ourselves through our inner critic just because it's something that's really vulnerable or that we've created a narrative around. I see it in so many different ways of what a corrective experience can be like. This example is not in a group setting, it's more of an individual setting. But a corrective experience can look like you recognize how much debt you're in. And instead of trying to do some weird Dave Ramsey method of like never allowing yourself to go out to eat again and like, I don't know, whatever harmful tactics he has, you could be willing to file for bankruptcy.
Hmm.
And that be okay. And we can work through that. I'm not going to shame you for that. That's such a it exists for a reason. And
Mhm.
I've literally watched clients go, I think it's my only option, and I'm terrified. I'm terrified of what my family will say, what my friends will say. Will I be able to find a place to live in the years that it takes for that bankruptcy to fall off? And we work through that, and then they make the choice. And I've never seen a happier person. Someone thriving who got it wiped and could start from the beginning almost, right? Not all of it gets eliminated, but most of it. And go, wow, I can make a budget and actually pay for things. Things are more manageable. I now can feel empowered. I'm empowered that I made a hard choice. And for 2 years, I worked through it with you. 2 years, and I made the choice. And then, what, 6 years later, it falls off, and they're like, oh, that time flew by, it didn't even impact me.
Hmm.
Yeah, it didn't. Or the teen who decides they're ready to pursue their GED because they have a skill for investing that no one clocked. No one clocked that they were really good with money and that they learned how to do stocks when they were like 12, 13, and they've been playing around. And they're now 16 and they're failing at school, but they're really smart. And they've admitted it and they've been willing to be vulnerable, maybe an individual or in group or both about it. And people start going, so then why don't you just get your GED? Well, did you know in Colorado they'll actually give you college credit if you get a certain score on your GED and a scholarship too? Why don't you take the practice test and find out? And then we take the practice test and they score 100 in every section. That's a corrective experience right there. Wow. I'm smarter than what everyone at school and my family keeps telling me because I failed. No, I know this. I've outgrown it.
Mm.
So why don't I go after my GED? Now they have the confidence to go, hey, mom, look, I got 100 on all 4 sections of the GED. I want to pursue it and I need your signature to do it. Here's all the benefits. In fact, I'd like to schedule a call with Lena and you so that we can go over the pros and cons and we can make the decision together. Will you do that? That's a corrective experience.
So these are like literally giving me chills. And also I kind of want to circle back to something you said a while ago, which is like there's these two pieces where first you identify something and then you say it to someone. And I kind of feel that coming up here in these examples, right? Like where like when you speak something to either a therapist or to like your group, then it is like it begins to invite stuff in. It begins to invite in like perspectives and validation, and it kind of like potentiates it. And like you said, it both holds space for it, but it also holds you accountable for it in a weird. So I'm just kind of curious about I'm just going to use the word magic, like the magic of like not just identifying something, but that second piece, which I don't think that many of us think about, which is like saying it to someone and like who do you say it to and what's the intention of saying it to someone? Um, yeah, so let me just ask that and then see where that takes us.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The way I would phrase what you just said is like the difference between self-awareness and self-reflection. Everyone is striving for self-awareness all the time. Like I hear people talk about that all the time. I'm going to therapy to become more self-aware, or I'm too self-aware and I wish I wasn't so self-aware. And the way that I think about self-awareness is that's you being aware, that's you understanding, you being mindful of the things that are important to you, that you dislike, all the things in your own head. Self-reflection and then reflection in general is being able to figure out how to word it and say it or put it out there to other people so then you can reflect more. We tend to stop at self-awareness. In fact, it's such a fad that like we forget that a big part of liberation is the reflection piece. We can't just stop at awareness. And there's magic in that reflection piece because it goes back almost to like if we can use the infinity loop example again of like if we're just staying in awareness, all we are is circulating, we're ruminating, we can get lost in it, our inner critic comes in, there's nowhere else that's going to give us anything to reflect. Community is the part that allows for reflection to happen. And that's important because otherwise we're just going to get stuck. It's really hard in the world. It's not easy to just live. We need both.
Oh my gosh. Ooh, that is really good. Um, I feel like that actually feels pretty complete. It also just feels like, oh my gosh, I just need to process this. I want and maybe I'll have more questions and more thoughts after I process it. I want to kind of talk a little bit more pragmatically as we kind of finish. So I
Yeah.
want to like first kind of speak directly to your clients, so tweens, teens, 20 somethings, and like if there is just some wisdom or some like pragmatic advice or just some stuff that you want to put out there for them to like think about or to begin to kind of organize their awareness around, just around like, like basic good financial hygiene or like just things that you should think about or explore. Um, And I realize that's very general. So I want to do that piece where you're talking directly to your clients. And then I want to kind of do the same thing, but speaking to parents now. Like what kind of supports or guidance can we give parents around helping their kids when it comes to things like finances and money?
Let's start with teens, tweens, teens, 20-something,
Yeah.
our young people. My first thing that I want everyone to know is that money is hard. It's complicated. And its roots are not, and it come from a good place. And if we can name that, we can then also name what are some of our more vulnerable values. And so I really want young people to sit down and think about, what is their relationship to money? Do they have it in their family? Do they not? Do they feel shameful? Do you feel vulnerable? Does it feel like something you shouldn't talk about? Does it feel like something you don't know why people wouldn't talk about? What is your own relationship with money? And then I want you to take a few moments and reflect. How do you want your relationship with money to be? Not what kind of money do you want to have? That's not what I'm talking about. I hope you all become millionaires. I really do. And what I want to know is, how do you want your relationship with money to be? Do you want to feel like I do? Do you want to feel proud and empowered and creative? Are there other things you want to feel about it? You don't want it to take up so much space. You want to know how to budget. What do you want to know about it? Because if it's just that you want to make a lot of it, well, we can't do anything with that. But if you know what you want your relationship to be with money, now we can decide what your goals are in general in life. If your goals are to feel empowered and creative, that might mean you take out a lot of student loans to get the degrees you need. But now we've got to be creative in the long term of how to pay them back. I want you to sit down and think about what your relationship is with your money, and then look at your goals and see how they connect. They won't always connect, but they do at some point. So think about how they connect. Financial hygiene wise, I just read this terrible life skills book for teens. Someone asked me to read it, and what they said to do is the exact opposite of what I'm going to say to do. What they said to do was, do not look at social media. And what I'm going to say is, go on social media, find a couple of people that align with your overarching values and your financial values, and then listen to them. Look at how the different savings accounts that they suggest. Look at the different budgets that they offer. There are a million and one ways to go about financial hygiene. But what's important is that you're intentional about which way you want to go. All of them are right. So it's just really about what you want, what sounds right to you, and then follow through on it. Be loyal to yourself in that, because there's a million and one ways to do it. And I don't care about the million and one ways. I care about which way works for you and feels good for you and aligns with your values. What works for me is not going to be the same as you. And that's okay. So go find people who have the same interests and values around finances as you do, and then tap into their community. And the best way to do that is go on social media. TikTok has them everywhere. Things to be aware of are ones that are scammy and to purchase programs or give them money for things. Those aren't the ones that we're going to go for. But the ones who offer all the free resources, the downloadable budget templates, or a budget template that's $3, those are the ones we want to go with. Ones that aren't going to shame you, but also aren't going to take advantage of you.
I love that. I was just thinking about like kind of the things that you said, which is like your relationship with money, your goals with money, your values around money. And then there's also like this just deconditioning piece around money, like especially if you want to do money differently than your family. And I do feel like we used to like not have access to deconditioning until like college, like when we literally went away and left the nest. And
Mhm.
social media is actually a really valuable and helpful deconditioning tool. Like you can get access to a completely different perspective or viewpoint. Just and like, speaking of free resources, like some of these 10-minute TikTok videos are like a whole workshop that can blow your mind. So
Yeah, I will, put a little plug out there. Her first 100K is like taught me all about stocks 2 years ago. And I thought it was so intimidating. And her like $120 workshop or whatever literally paved the path for me to understand stocks and investing. And it was so simple that I was infuriated that I wasn't taught it in school. Infuriated. But I learned about her through TikTok.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I see it with like my parenting, my neurodiversity stuff. A lot of people are like, I learned more about my own PDA on TikTok than I ever did with like even these like specialists that I was taking my kid to. So, um,
Mhm.
yes, I love that. And let's keep track of the stuff that you kind of threw out there resource wise, and we can link it in the show notes. So it was like, what was it called? My first 1000K or
Her first 100K, yeah.
oh, her first 100K. And then there was also earlier in the conversation, you mentioned some books that you'd read that had helped kind of shape your practice. I think it was Burton or
Oh, yeah, some authors or activists,
yeah.
educators. Yeah, I would say a really good place to start would be Tima Akun's Divorcing White Supremacy Characteristics.
Okay.
Um, and it's a website, a very
Um,
great website for, and it's
okay, cool.
featured on
I'm
it.
just
And
gonna ask you to like spell this stuff for me and then I can link it in the show notes. But I'll do that. I just want to finish up this conversation before we kind of get into your stuff and what you offer, and you can tell us a little bit more about what you have going on.
yeah,
So this was, I feel like, really helpful. And then similarly now, can we kind of pretend that we're talking to parents and or like, what do you wish parents knew about helping their children become, creative, empowered, joyful, like in good relationship with money, and how can they help facilitate that?
yeah. You said something really important, which is we have to decondition ourselves. And how often do we actually take time to reflect on if our relationship with money still is the same as adults and if we agree with it? I know that I don't. I'm like, oh, I have to do all these things. It can be so anxiety inducing or stressful. And so, one, I want to encourage parents to be be willing to be vulnerable and transparent about money in your household. If you have an anxious relationship with money, name it out loud. Start doing some of your financial stuff in front of your family. Not let's sit down and do it together, but like instead of locking yourself away in a room, like do it out in the household so that everyone can see that this is a part of life and it's okay to get dysregulated around it. It's okay to feel big feelings around it, and then model how you're going to manage that. A lot of where our values of on money comes from like the secrecy or like putting it on a pedestal, like and attaining it and putting so much pressure on it. I mean, there's so many parents that go like, I just need them to get through school and get good grades. And if they do that, they can go to college and they'll be successful. And they put all this pressure on it, but we don't do any of the educating around like, But why is that important? What is even important about that? Is it because we feel anxious? We didn't set ourselves up well for if they're not successful, if our kids aren't making hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, will we be okay when we retire? And part of that is we never talk about that in families. We never model it, we never share it. And so it really it is, I don't want people to like, I don't want parents to go out and have you just put everything on your kids' shoulders, your family's shoulders. That's not what I'm asking. What I am asking is to be willing to be more transparent and vulnerable about your own views and relationships with monies, and be aware and reflective about how your habits come from intergenerational trauma around finances, or just intergenerational experiences around finances. And the way that we manage that or disrupt it or decondition it is by not keeping it so secret or hidden, that we talk about it and we model around it what we wish we didn't have to struggle through. I feel like I got pretty convoluted in that, in parts my
No, I mean,
tracking.
what I have kind of been feeling into throughout this conversation is there has been like a little bit, like I remember asking you for a curriculum at one point and you were like, I don't do that. And I'm like, but I am also kind of feeling out this pattern or this process, which is like identify it, speak it into a brave space, and then like seek out corrective experiences. And I think like for parents too, like that's a pretty good, just like, if you want to call it a step by step to like play around with, like get kind of aware on what your money shit is, then like allow the reflection piece to come into play, like articulate it, see what your community reflects back, like bring it into a brave space, play with an edge, and seek out a corrective experience.
Well, it's like I think a really good comparison is like those of us who are pretty progressive in like the sexual health world, with our kids. Like we're willing to talk about consent now. We're willing to talk about bodies, right? Are we willing to do the same thing around money?
Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation just has me actually thinking and lamenting like there are, at least it feels this way to me, there's so few spaces
Mhm.
to just have clean conversations or clean support around money. Like to your point, I feel like a lot of parents, well, I think a lot of parents don't teach their kids about like money at all. Like it's just like osmosis, totally unconscious. And then I do think the parents that like are like, oh yeah, like maybe I should teach my kids about money. It's more like about like investing and budgeting versus this other piece around like creativity, empowerment, emotions, like the relationship to money, like money is an energetic. And so yeah, I really am kind of feeling maybe outside of some like coaches programs around money, like we just don't have that available at all.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
which is really, I mean, which just really highlights like how important it is that you weave it in as an integral part of your work. Like that is so unique and so special.
Mm.
And also I'm just kind of thinking like we need to be doing, to your point, like in the way that we're having these conversations around consent, like we need to be just doing something with that piece that is like intentionally clean and empowered.
Yeah, because it's unrealistic to think that we will all be millionaires and be a-okay. But what we can be realistic about is, do we feel good in the life that we have? And a huge part of that is our relationship with money. We don't have to be making this exuberant amount of money. In fact, most of us don't. But there are a lot of people in the world who are really content and happy with their lives. They've probably done some work around their relationship with money. And everyone has that as a right. Every person deserves that as a human right, from my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just the like the safety, to do that. Because I do think, speaking of our conditioning, sometimes like that work just feels so triggering or off limits because already our conditioning is so like fearful or so anxious or so shameful. Um, it can just be really hard to even enter that space in that arena, to even
Yeah.
like be like, consider the question, like, what is my relationship with money? Like already like just hearing that question can bring up a lot. So,
Mhm, mhm.
which are probably good reasons for someone to think about working with you. Or
Oh,
so I don't know, like, let me ask you before we move on to the piece where you say a little bit more about, what offerings you have or what you want to share about your work and how people can connect with you. Does this conversation feel complete? Like, is there anything else that you want to circle back to? Or like, is there anything else that you want to add to make it feel complete?
yeah. There is one thing as you were talking that I really want parents to take away, which is finances can be fun. For as stressful as they can be fun. And if we can tap into where money can be fun, we have a greater chance of imparting that wisdom and the importance of it and taking away the shame than if we come at it as this like all encompassing, terrible, like life sucking cat. Like, I hate it because it's about capitalism. Like, all of those things are true. And on the other side of the coin, it can be fun. So I really want parents and this teens too. Where can money be fun? Not necessarily spending it, but where can your relationship with money also be
For people who hear that question and their brain just goes like, like, what, give me something to anchor into here. Like, how do we make money fun? Like, what's something that people can play with or try? Or like, when you floated that idea to clients in the past, like, what are things that they've gone and done to make money more fun?
Yeah. So here's one that I practice in my household and I do it because I started practicing it with my clients in session. We would start in session and I was like, "Oh, I should implement this at home too," which is they were budgeting with me in session, right? Because they just needed an accountability partner. It takes 5 minutes after you set it up, so they just wanted to budget real quick.
Mhm.
And what I started noticing was that they made it fun by going, wait a minute, I need to go get my tea and I need to get my favorite cozy blanket and I need to like grab this and let me put on the music and like let me share my screen real quick and let's do it. And I realized in my household, we like begrudgingly go into our budget and we're like, oh my God, this is such a chore. Like, I don't want to do it. And I brought the idea of like, can we almost make it like a date night in our house or like a play night in our house where like everyone brings up their budget and like what we did is like we made a really good meal and we have all of our favorite snacks and like everyone comes in their PJs and like we have our favorite beverages and we have fun music playing and everyone sits down in the way that they like to update their budget, whether it's on your computer or tablet or phone, and we all do it and we put a timer on and everyone does it. And when it's done, we have a dance party afterwards, and then we move on with our night. And we do that every 2 weeks. And it's quick, it takes like 25 minutes for everybody to do it. And that's like if we did a lot of wild things in those 2 weeks, real quick. But now it's fun, and we look forward to that because it's also a time for us to connect. And then we get to move on and go do whatever else we want to do. And we do it every 2 weeks on Sunday. Really quick, easy way to set up. But that's fun for us. It made it fun and approachable.
Oh, it's so interesting too. Like, I am just sensing into how many people could really benefit from co-regulation around money. And to
Yeah.
your point, how many people do it like so by themselves. And I'm even thinking about like in certain family constellations, like it's not the adults in the family working on it together. Like it tends to be mostly one person's responsibility. And then like
Mhm.
they're doing it themselves. Like it's very rarely like co-equal and collaborative. So I love that too, just thinking about ways that we can add in more co-regulation, more collaboration, more community in this very real experiential way whenever we're dealing with money. So it's really beautiful. And then the dancing piece is good, kind of just like an energetic movement cleanse at the end there.
Yeah, 100%, because I'm a person that needs to move all the time. And I think about how that spans like generations too, right? Where like, or age ranges, where like you as the adults might be the only ones who are doing budgeting, but like what can that mean for the family? Does that mean like maybe we have like an educational podcast going on while the parents are doing it that's about money, and so kids are playing
Love
and
that.
doing their things, but they're hearing the words, right? And if it's a teen being like, hey, we have an extra $25 this month, or we've been saving this money aside, as you know, because we want to start teaching you about stocks and we want to learn aside alongside you. So we're going to actually give you a stock account and we're going to hang out with you while we learn how to invest this together for these 25 minutes on a Sunday, because I haven't invested as an adult, but we decided that we were going to save this money for you to be able to play around with. So let's do it together. Like that could be a fun way. Like there's so many ways to incorporate across the age range, even for those in our families who aren't budgeting, or maybe we don't give allowances, things like that.
This just feels like such a radical idea to have like family money time. And I'm so glad that you brought that.
I like that anytime. Yeah. Mhm.
Oh my gosh. I think this has given people so much to just think about. There's been so many like juicy questions and just ideas. This has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Yay. Um, okay, does it feel complete now?
I think it feels complete for me now.
Hey, okay, so cool. So, if people want to find out more about you, if people are interested in working with you, if people want to like be in your world, what say you? Give us some stuffs.
Yeah, well, we are everywhere. I feel like we have our website, interfaithbridge.com. That's the best place to find information, resources, and get connected with our community. We have all of our blogs, both for teens and parents and young adults in there. For people to pick through. We also have a newsletter that we love people to sign up for. We send that out about once a month. That gives insights into my brain, our team's brain, and just any of our offerings, including workshops, groups, and our community partnerships. And then, of course, we're like on every social media because I love social media. So we're on Instagram, kind of on Facebook, I guess. We're on TikTok, all of the
That's
social.
not really my demographic.
Yeah, whatever gets posted on Instagram goes on Facebook. But yeah, none of us are really hanging out there. Instagram's probably the best place, and it's at Interfaith Bridge. So you can find us in all the places.
Cool. Do you have a TikToker?
I do. My TikTok is Lena Hilder. I'm bad at updating it. I'm so just much more willing to update on Instagram, but I do have some tidbits that people really love on TikTok. So if people are engaging with me there or
We'll
asking
link it
questions,
all. We'll link it
yeah,
all in the show notes. I think it's good to have a home-based social media platform. Sounds like Instagram is yours.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.